Most people assume Jeremy Clarkson lost. Fired from the biggest car show on television, publicly humiliated, handed a one-way exit from a $50 million a year franchise. That reading is wrong. And the gap between how this looked and what actually happened is one of the most instructive negotiating stories in television history. Because here's what the headlines missed. The moment the BBC bought out Clarkson's ownership stake in 2012, they thought they were consolidating control. What they actually did was remove the last financial reason he had to stay. 3 years later, when a steak dinner in Yorkshire went badly wrong and his contract wasn't renewed, walking away cost him nothing. He and 3 others formed an equal shares company, sold themselves to Amazon for a reported $160 million, and left the BBC holding every asset except the one that mattered. Most people think this is a story about a punch, a petition, and a presenter getting fired. It's not. It's a story about leverage, who actually owned what, and what happens when the people who create the value finally figure that out. By the end of this, you'll see why the BBC's decision was ethically defensible and commercially catastrophic at the same time, and what that means for anyone who's ever wondered where the real value sits in any deal. Let's start with the empire. Top Gear aired in more than 200 countries and was watched by 350 million viewers worldwide. The Guinness Book of World Records called it the world's most widely watched factual program. It reportedly brought in around $50 million a year for BBC worldwide, more than Doctor Who. 3 middle-aged men driving cars around and arguing had somehow become one of the most valuable things on television. And the BBC, to their credit, knew it. So back in 2012, they did something quietly clever. They bought out the last piece of it they didn't already own. Here's the bit that changes everything, and almost nobody noticed it at the time. Better 6 was the company that controlled Top Gear's commercial rights. International sales, books, DVDs, all of it. It was founded by Jeremy Clarkson and executive producer Andy Willman. The BBC held half. Clarkson and Willman shared the rest. So Clarkson wasn't just a presenter. He was a co-owner of the commercial engine behind the show. Then, in 2012, BBC Worldwide paid $16.2 million to take full control of Better 6. Clarkson, with a 30% share, collected more than $8 million. Willman picked up more than $5 million. The BBC now owned 100% of the business. The name, the format, the archive, the stig. All of it. On paper, a brilliant move. Total control of their biggest commercial property. What they hadn't thought through was what they'd done to the people on the other side of the deal. The moment Clarkson and Willman cashed out, the handcuffs came off. 2 years later, walking away would cost them nothing. And nobody noticed. Keep that in the back of your mind. First, the steak. March 2015. End of a long shoot day in Yorkshire. No hot food waiting. The BBC confirmed it would not renew Clarkson's contract after a fight with a producer over a lack of hot food. An internal investigation found Clarkson had verbally abused producer Oisin Timon for around 20 minutes before physically attacking him. And here's the detail most retellings skip. Clarkson reported himself to BBC management before the story broke. That's not the behavior of someone who thought he was untouchable. It's the behavior of someone who knew the rules and knew he'd broken them. And he was already on a final warning from the previous year. This wasn't a first offense. The BBC suspended him. Then came the petition. More than 1 million fans backed a campaign to reinstate him. And the delivery of that petition is one of the great pieces of television-adjacent theater. Guido Fawkes drove it to Broadcasting House in a tank. An actual tank. Bring Back Clarkson painted on the side, gun barrel pointed at the building, driver dressed as the Stig. You genuinely could not make it up. Over 1 million signatures, delivered by tank, and it changed nothing. Director General Tony Hall said he had not taken the decision lightly, but a line has been crossed. Clarkson's contract wasn't renewed. Hammond and May's contracts were also up, and both had made clear they wouldn't stay without him. So all 3 walked. And so did their producer. Now here's where it gets interesting. The BBC held the cards. Or so it looked. They owned the Top Gear name, the format, the archive, the stig, the studio, the celebrity lapboard. The trio reportedly couldn't even use the word gear in a new title, which is why the working title Gear Knobs existed briefly and was never usable. The BBC had the whole fortress. Everything except the one thing you can't put in a contract. 4 people walked out the door. 3 presenters and 1 producer. Andy Willman, Clarkson's schoolmate from Repton and the man who had actually architected the modern format of the show. And the 4 of them did something that is, honestly, a masterclass in understanding where value lives. They formed a production company, Chump Sons. Equal shares. All 4 of them. They didn't hire their producer and give him a salary. They made him a partner. That's why the band stayed together. Now they had something to sell, not a show, not a format, not a name. 4 people with 13 years of on-screen chemistry, a global fan base, and 0 equity handcuffs. The bidding started. Netflix came in. Amazon came in. Amazon reportedly paid $160 million for 36 episodes, a figure Netflix publicly called not worth the money. Jeff Bezos described it as very, very, very expensive, and worth it. And then Amazon watched the Grand Tour become the flagship that launched Prime Video as a serious competitor to Netflix. Compare the budgets. Top Gear at the BBC, around $500,000 per episode. The Grand Tour, roughly $4.4 million per episode. The value hadn't disappeared when Clarkson's contract ended. It had just changed addresses. But here's the legal chess match nobody talks about. The BBC's lawyers were thorough. The Grand Tour couldn't have a celebrity segment with a laptime leaderboard, couldn't have the stig, couldn't use a studio. So what did they do? They turned every legal restriction into content. Instead of a studio, a traveling tent. A literal circus big top in a different exotic location every episode. Instead of the stig, a character called the American. And instead of a celebrity lap segment, celebrity brain crash. A recurring bit where every celebrity guest died in an increasingly absurd accident before reaching the interview chair. Every week. A different ridiculous death. The segment existed for one reason: to mock the segment the lawyers had banned. They took the legal restrictions and made them funnier than the original content. That is not the behavior of people who lost. That's the behavior of people who understood exactly what they were doing. And then came the proof. The BBC relaunched Top Gear with Chris Evans, who said he'd be disappointed with fewer than 5 million viewers. The opening episode drew 4.4 million. Then it kept falling. The season finale attracted just 1.9 million, down from 5.8 million in the trio's era. Evans quit after 1 series. The BBC had kept 100% of the assets and lost 2/3 of the audience. In 1 series. That is the cleanest proof in television history that the value was never in the format. It was in the people. Now, and this matters, the BBC's decision wasn't wrong. Oisin Timon was injured. He later settled a claim reported at over $100,000, and Clarkson publicly apologized. Tony Hall made an ethically defensible call. You cannot have one rule for a star and another for everyone else. The BBC did the right thing. It just happened to cost them the golden goose. And that tension, between doing the right thing and the commercial consequences of it, is what makes this story genuinely interesting rather than just a fan grievance. So, what's the actual lesson? Contracts can own a show's name, its format, its track, its mascot, even the word gear. But not chemistry, trust, or an audience's loyalty. Clarkson, Hammond, May, and Willman ran Chump Sons for nearly a decade, took it to its natural end, and wound it down on their own terms, closing a 23-year television partnership. The BBC kept every asset. The trio kept the things worth considerably more than the name on the door. The real negotiation happened years before anyone knew there was a negotiation. It happened the moment the BBC bought out Better 6 and inadvertently freed the people who made the show worth buying. The fine print, as always, was where the whole story lived. If you want to see how deals like this actually work, the hidden ownership structures, the leverage nobody talks about, we've got more of those, and the next one is sitting right there. Drop a comment with what surprised you most. The Better 6 buyout, the equal shares company, or the tank. Because honestly, it should be the tank. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.